Total, my first met, I was scared.
I think society deserves to be protected from me and from others like me.
They were sexual fantasies of control, power, complete dominance. They became reality.
I'm supposed to schedule it, so I went to bed. Gerard, I've got an ex.
Shh. I closed my eyes. I was crying so hard. And all of a sudden, he was there.
It was the only thing that gave me any satisfaction.
I am a human being and I killed human beings.
Dead more body. It's the living you gotta worry about.
Welcome to Profiler Africa. My name is Paul Llewellyn. In a country where 83 people are murdered every day, Profiler Africa has become the space where we unpack the psychology and the science behind violent crime. Tonight, we're not talking about murder, but a very interesting topic. One I recall from our last conversation being a little bit disheartening, but something it can be just as terrifying. A case Gerard once described as psychological terrorism. We're going back to 2010, just after the World Cup, when a psychiatrist in Pretoria called Gerard with a personal problem. She was being stalked. And yes, we will unpack more about that in a little while. But first, joining me as always is the former head of forensic psychology at the South African Police Service, Gerard Labuschagne, joining us as always all the way from Canada. Good evening, Gerard. How are you doing?
Hey, Paul, doing pretty good, and hello to all our listeners and viewers.
Yes, it's been a couple of weeks since we actually chatted, which is a bit unusual. How's it going?
Going well. Spent the whole week last week helping do some training on various things like stalking and domestic violence, general violence, what else? Triaging violent incidences. Yeah, a whole week of training that we were presenting in Calgary in Alberta province.
Okay, awesome. Before we dive into tonight's topic, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed, hit the join button to support us, or you can buy us a coffee using the link in the description. Every bit helps, so please do contribute if you'd like. We also invite you to share your comments and questions as we go, if you have anything you'd like us to unpack specifically about tonight's comment. And of course, we're always open to the odd super like if you feel like sharing a little bit of the love. Okay, Gerard, so we're talking about stalking tonight, which is an interesting topic, especially when you get into kind of the laws around it and what some of the challenges are, which we'll do a little bit later. But first of all, let's maybe contextualize. What exactly is stalking? I imagine it comes in lots of different shapes and sizes these days.
Yes, obviously, different countries will have it defined differently in their criminal law. As we said, we'll touch on it a bit later, we don't have a law called stalking in South Africa, a crime. If you look at a lot of the sort of academic literature, it's they center around the same things, this unwanted, repeated contact, communication, or other behavior that deliberately or recklessly causes people to experience fear for their safety or others known to them. So that's kind of like this unwanted, it's repeated stuff. Now, how often is repeated is up to debate. And that person knows or should have known would have caused distress in another person. So that can just be fear. It can be physical harm. It can be damage to property. But there's fear for your body, whether it's your psychological body or your physical body, as a result of this behavior.
Okay, and how common is this? I mean, how in your career, how many of these types of cases did you actually work on?
So we didn't work on a lot, but the main reason is that a lot of people don't report it. Yeah. I mean, if you get 2 or 3 unwanted text messages from someone you know or someone you don't know, that's stalking. But we don't think of it often as that. And it might stop after the third one because you told the person to F off, and they do. So a lot of it is happening more often and frequently. It's not reported to the police. Often what the person is doing doesn't necessarily reach the boundaries of a criminal act. And often when you do report to the police, they're like, well, we can't do anything. We don't know who it is who's stalking you. There's no crime such as stalking, so you can't report this, which is nonsense. We'll get into that now. Yeah. So it's far more common and people just ignore it, or it's not attended to, or the police don't do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stories I come across, unfortunately, when in relation to these kinds of things, are where the victims have really struggled to find any kind of meaningful support. And I guess in South Africa, where you've got a lot of dockets sitting on any detective's case, these can kind of get a little bit lost.
Yeah, and what happens often is it's often in the context of an intimate partner relationship. Either one that's ended, and the person doesn't want to accept it, and he's, you horrible woman, you this, you that, and sends you sort of unpleasant, angry messages that you don't want, or you tell them stop doing this. That's stalking, but we don't think of it. We just think of it, that's the ending off of a relationship in some cases. So we often don't people don't even realize that actually what the person's behavior is actually stalking.
Okay. Let's just say hello to some folks on the chat. We've got Bianca Baez, who's become a member. Thank you very much. Please do hit the subscribe button, join if you haven't. And if you want to become a member, just a little monthly contribution, and it helps towards the effort. We've got Modley, good evening. We've got Marius joining us tonight from the Southern Cape. Good evening again, Marius. Always nice to have Marius with us. We got Fifi from Texas as well. So all over the world tonight. All right, let's see. And we've got actually a comment from Bianca. In a lot of countries, stalking is not taken seriously. Is it taken serious in South Africa? And how many incidents do there have to be for the police to recognize this as a stalking case? So when do we get to the point where the police are actually going to maybe pay some attention to these kinds of things?
The reality is, like I said, so we don't have a crime called stalking in South Africa. So you can't go to the police and say, I want to open up a stalking case. In fact, I definitely advise you not to use the word stalking. Okay. And rather just say, someone has been threatening me. Someone has, thrown a brick through my window. I mean, stalking encompasses such a wide range of behaviors. It can be text messages, emails, the person standing outside your house waiting for you on the street corner for 5 times in a row every day when you go to work, to, throwing a brick through your window, to assaulting you. So stalking really is a massive potential number of behavior, but it's this unwanted, repeated behavior that causes you fear. That's the nuts and bolts of the definition. Yeah. So it's easier, sadly, to say it if it fits in what the traditional police's view of a crime is. He threw a brick through my window. Yes, he was sending me threatening messages, but he threw a brick from my window. They're probably going to go, okay, great. That's malicious damage to property. We can investigate that. That's a crime. But the angry SMSs, the threatening SMSs, they often don't know what to do with it because they don't see that as being a crime. So sadly, when it's something in the behavior fits more into the traditional sense of what a typical crime is, the police are a bit more, okay, we know what that is. So they're not good at this, but he's sending me death threats, which is a crime. But they'll go, but he hasn't done anything yet, come back to me, which is, it's just the most ridiculous statement that people can make. But you get that across the world, to be honest with you. For sure. So it's easier when something that fits in with the normal definition of a crime, and that's what you report. They might not do anything else about the other stuff and the angry SMSs. That might just be background context for them. It might be introduced during the trial, if there is even a trial, to say, but there was a bigger pattern of stuff going on. But it has to look like a traditional crime. So that's why I say don't go to the police in South Africa and say, I want to open a stalking doc, because they say it doesn't exist, goodbye. But what he was doing to you might count as multiple crimes in South African law. And also what the other thing you sometimes get is they'll say to you, you can't open up a criminal case, you must get a protection order. That's what the protection order, and that's absolute nonsense. A criminal case and a protection order are 2 separate things. They serve 2 separate purposes, and you can have both at the same time, although the cops will try and get you to go to the magistrate's court to rather open up a protection order. Protection order is not investigating a crime that's been committed. It's an instruction from the court to say, stop doing this. And if you don't stop doing 1, 2, and 3, you will be contravening a court order, and that is a crime. So it's not one or the other, and that's the biggest nonsense. And of course, if you were in a relationship with this person, even if it was one date, and he stalks you thereafter, you would then use the domestic violence's protection order as opposed to a normal protection order. Just some quick splitting of it,
All right. Well, we'll get into some more of this kind of stuff and some more of the legal deal, because it is kind of one of those. It is one of those crimes where you do need to be a little bit more informed of the the options that you have available to you when it comes to reporting. But let's talk about this case, and then we can unpack some of the kind of realities around this for people in South Africa specifically, and we can talk more broadly about other countries as well. But this case came across your desk when a former colleague of yours, a psychiatrist, reached out to you. Start there.
Yeah. So this would have been about July 2010. I think the World Cup had just finished at that point in South Africa. And I get a phone call from someone who, when I used to work at Westkopjes Hospital from 98 till 2001, I'd known someone who at that time been specializing in psychiatry. And then obviously they qualified. I went on my way, eventually joined the police. They qualified and opened up a private practice. And she phoned me to say that she's been receiving text messages from someone. She thinks it is a possible patient of hers, but she's not 100% sure. And this individual would send sort of messages about masturbating and wanting to masturbate and, hey, doc. So the person knew she was a medical practitioner of some sort. So it wasn't like a random number that might just reach out randomly to someone. And she said, look, I don't know what to do with this. If it's a patient, I would deal with it a bit differently compared to maybe if it wasn't a patient, maybe what kind of patient it is. If I'm treating someone for something in this realm of issues, I'd rather try and deal with it, from a treatment point of view, etc. So I opened up an inquiry at our office. This was probably the only docket where I was actually the investigating officer from start to finish. Okay. So I opened up an inquiry at our office. I then took, because it was SMS, remember, this is I don't even think we had WhatsApp in those days. I think Mixit was the only alternative to SMS messages.
Remember Mixit.
That's how old this is.
Yeah.
And so we took,
sorry, no, Karen.
We took the number that had been used to send the messages, and we applied for a section as a 205 subpoena for the details from the service providers. But we didn't just ask for any name linked to that SIM card. We also said, please tell us what other SIM cards have been used in the same phone, the handset, for, let's say, a year around that time. Because that would then tell us, because what we assumed is that the suspect was putting a pay-as-you-go prepaid SIM card in, making his problematic, troubling phone calls or messages, and then taking it out again, and was probably using the same phone, putting his normal SIM card in.
Yeah.
So we knew that the one that was the trouble-causing SIM card probably wasn't going to give us much help in tracking him down. And that's what we did. We did that. We submitted it. We got it back, and we could see that there was 2 SIM cards, if I recall correctly. The one which was the troublemaking card, which the psychiatrist had received the message from, had been in use for a year, and it sent about 484 messages. And basically, these were all outgoing SMSs. Okay. There was no phone calls made from that SIM card. There was no incoming, he wasn't chatting with someone. You could see that, incoming, outgoing messages. They were almost all outgoing. But at the same time frame of that year, another SIM card was more regularly in that phone, and that had been used 2,900 times. So clearly that one, the second one, was the actual number that the guy would use for his daily communications with friends and family and for work. Okay. So what we did then, I just
want to contextualize some of the phone stuff, because first of all, pay as you go. I'm not sure if that is a totally common thing everywhere. I know it's a South African thing, and I think it's spread around the world. But pay as you go is essentially a service that's offered here in South Africa where you're able to pre-buy data that you then essentially use until it drains, and then you can reload a new chunk of data or call time or YouTube minutes or whatever. So and then this would have also been pre-FICA time. In South Africa, we've got the FICA laws, which require you, when you register for a SIM card today, you're required to show a proof of address. You're required to show your ID book and give positive identification. So this was all pre that.
Yeah. So basically, back then you could walk into any shop, corner shop, grocery store, buy a prepaid SIM, stick it in your phone, charge it up with whatever, and make calls, and etc. Interesting, a lot of countries don't actually have SIM cards even. That's interesting. So perhaps even in the US, I think they don't use SIMs in the way that we use. So that's another little interesting fact.
Yeah, okay.
So So absolutely right. So this was the days before, by law, you had to register it to a name. Now, still, even nowadays, there's ways around that. You can get, if you go to these local cell phone shops in any mall, you can probably ask a guy, does he have a card for you, that you don't have to prove who you are. But basically back then it was much easier for people to do this. Now, it's not that they weren't traceable. So everybody thought, well, a prepaid is untraceable. No, it leaves the exact same forensic trace as any other number. It's just not linked to an account with a name traditionally, like if you had a contract phone.
Yeah, exactly.
But its calls, its contacts is exactly the same as any other card. Okay, so that's basically what we had. So we asked her to then check in her patient database, does this other number, the one that had been used 2,900 times, does it match? Because we could have obviously gone back to the courts and say, please give us a new subpoena to ask the cell phone company, who is this person who is using this number? But we thought there's a good chance this is going to be a patient, so it's going to be much quicker just to say to the psychiatrist, check this number in your database, and then does it show up as being one of your people?
Yeah.
That when they filled in whatever forms. Yeah.
Sorry, did you mention how long it took to actually access this information from the cellular companies?
Back then, I think it was about a 2-week turnaround time, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know nowadays if it's faster. I do know that over the years, the cell phone companies got better at having whole departments and divisions that are there for law enforcement response. So, but I don't know currently, is it, faster, slower, better?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not sure.
And during this period when you were kind of looking for information, did you give your psychiatrist friend any instructions with regards to if you receive any messages, do X or anything like that?
Yeah, so basically we just said, look, it's in any stalker situation, either just don't respond, or what we sometimes will say is just send a message saying, stop contacting me, I have no interest in any communications with you, and that's it. So the only reason why that we tell people to say that, not because we think the guy's going to necessarily stop then, but because sometimes the courts, if you apply for a protection order, and it's not the right attitude, but sometimes they'll say, but did you ever just tell the guy to stop? It's like you have to tell someone to stop sending you harassing messages. So sometimes from a legal point of view, it's just better to have sent that one, stop, I have no interests. If you continue, I'm going to go to the police. So there's no doubts that you did not want this communication. But like that, as I said, is often more to convince the court if you want to apply for a protection order. It's not a requirement, but it just sometimes shows, see, I did trying to get him stopped, and he continued thereafter.
Absolutely. Before we go to, revealing the suspect's identity, which and kind of cross-referencing against her patient records, let's just take a couple of comments. We've got Keith. Hey, all from Johannesburg. Hi, Keith. How's it going? Bianca says, I think the hard part is showing evidence for a stalking, and the fact that victims get looked at as if they're crazy and making stuff up. Well, yeah, I mean, in South Africa, we must also talk about that as just how victims are treated, essentially, as typically when they're reporting things, how victims rather. Are people in South Africa able to get protective orders through the court system, like in the US? Yes, they are, and we'll unpack more of that. Marley says, Baby Reindeer puts stalking on the map. I still haven't watched that. Have you watched it? I
haven't either, to be embarrassed to say.
Yeah, no, okay. So Marley, me and Gerard are both putting it on our to-do list to binge watch this weekend. And then let's take one more. It's a criminal act in SA, but once again, overwhelmed and under-resourced SAPs who are also not trained in the law. Okay, so we'll talk about what you can do to be more informed and what we should hope that SAPs will one day be able to do to be more informed as well as we go. So you asked her to cross-reference against her patient records, and what did you come up with?
Well, it came up with the name of one of her patients. And this was a guy who had been referred to her by her employer, the suspect's employer, because he had substance issues. HR had sort of booked him off temporarily, sent him to this particular psychiatrist because she worked in the substance abuse arena. So that was her area of expertise. And yes, unfortunately, he decided he's going to now send these inappropriate messages to a patient. Now, what's interesting, I said to her, I don't know if I asked her before we found out the name, who do you think it is? And what was interesting, who she thought it might be was not the guy who it actually was. That's just an interesting side issue.
No, that is absolutely. Okay. So now you've identified someone. What? You just hop in the police car, straight to his house, and we lock him up.
Oh, no. So you could have done that. If you wanted to be lazy, you have that statement from this lady. At that point, it would have been things like exposing someone to, because he also sent pictures of himself masturbating, or little, what were those called? MMSs, SMSs with the text, and then MMSs with the little videos,
yes.
etc., or still shots of him holding his, well, we assume his penis, and sending those to us. So at that point, it would have been probably, in terms of the Sexual Offences Act, I do have the charges, exposing someone to genitals without them wanting to. Now, nowadays, probably with the Cybercrimes Act, there will be different charges you could also add. But I think was pre that. So we were using the Sexual Offences Act, which was essentially like flashing, like a flasher if you're walking down the street and the guy says, hey, come over here, and he exposes himself. We were kind of using that law for this. So we could have stopped there, but we knew that other SIM card, the one he'd sent the messages from, that was the number he was using to stalk lots of people. So when we looked at that, there were, and of course I went and highlighted how many times each the same number appeared. And what he would clearly do is he would bother a lady for a night or so, and then shift over to a new number the following night, and then shift over to a new number. And he had about 40 different people. So from the lady's perspective, one night she would get 5 or 6 messages, and then nothing for a month. So for some of these people, it wasn't worthwhile changing their phone number, because as you'll see now, some of them were estate agents. So your phone is your business. If you're a psychiatrist, you can't just so much change your number. So, for them, it wasn't enough to go report it in some cases, and almost none of them did. We'll get into that in a moment. But we knew this was basically a victim list. So we started to contact each and every one of those phone numbers. So I intentionally phoned from... I think I phoned from my cell phone, because our office phone number would show up as private number. So now imagine this. You were being stalked. Some dude phones you from a private number and says, hey, were you being stalked? I'm from the police. So we specifically phoned from my cell number. And I said, and of course, still we had some people who were a bit suspicious. Yeah. And I said, I'm an investigating officer. I can give you my office number. You can see this is my cell phone number. And I'm happy to meet you at a police station where we can take your statement.
I'm Gerard Labuschagne. Yeah. You've seen me on the news. I just want to interrupt you, because I want to ask if you have folks helping you. Who's working on this case with you, or is it just solo Gerard the detective at work here, or have you got an intern bashing out the phone calls?
No, I had my excellent chief investigator Jan de Lange, who many of us know from the show, was helping me out with the case.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So. So really it was not a out there investigation. It was kind of like a paper investigation. You're going, phoning, taking the statements, of course, that was going out, meeting with the people. But a lot of it was a sort of the nerdy investigation, if you want to call it that, going through things. Yeah. So in the end, I think I had about 9 women that gave me statements. Almost everybody that I got hold of said, yes, I had received messages. Sometimes it had been up to 42 messages. Sometimes it had been a couple of messages. Some people said, a few, then I just ignored it and whatever. Some didn't want to open up cases for various reasons. One person of these 40 had actually tried to open up a case. But just to give you a spectrum of the types of victims, they were all female. Surprise, surprise. Some of them he knew. Obviously his psychiatrist, his HR manager at work, friend of a friend, someone at the same gym that he went to, a private trainer, a customer from his place of work, and then some he had no previous contact with, estate agents. And of course, estate agents put those boards, on the outside on the street with their pictures on them and their phone numbers. So you can literally shop around. And in fact, when I was trying to identify some of these people, I actually took those. Sometimes you would get these estate agent magazines in for free, like outside of a corner shop. Yeah. And I would actually go get some of those, and I'd actually go through and just look for the numbers. And then I would actually see, okay, this is Jane Smith, and that's, so and so. So that's another way. Otherwise, obviously we just try to phone them directly to see who we can.
Yeah, and if you recall one, I mean, just as a note to folks in these kinds of industries, I mean, unfortunately, when your details are on public display, I mean, it can attract some negative attention. If we think about Jose da Silva, that case in particular, where, of course, he was setting appointments with estate agents and eventually ended up murdering she was an interior designer, interior decorator, yeah. So be extra vigilant. I mean, you have to be extra vigilant if you're putting your contact details in a public forum anyway, guys. And I think we should all be aware of what you're putting on social media, etc. All very important.
Absolutely. Profile pictures. I mean, I have a friend. He's an investigator at a big company, and one of his jobs is to investigate when some of their suppliers, if there's something dodgy potentially about the supplier. And for example, one day he did find out there was something dodgy about one of their suppliers, and that caused the supplier to be exited as a contractor for the company. And then a week or so later, because he had the supplier's cell number on his WhatsApp, as a WhatsApp contact. And he's looking through, I don't know what he was doing, but he's looking through his chats and whatever, and all of a sudden he sees under this guy's WhatsApp profile picture is pictures of his own family, the investigator's family. So what he had done is the supplier had gone and looked and found him on social media. Now, yes, his Facebook page was closed, it wasn't open to anybody else, etc. But your profile picture is still visible, and he would have profile picture of, for example, his wife and kids. And then basically he could also see who was his wife and then go onto her profile and at least screen grab that picture and then post it on his own. So it was a very subtle, indirect threat. He wasn't sending my friend the pictures. He had it on his own WhatsApp profile. But of course, the message is very, very intimidating. And, that definitely is a threat. Whether the police would have seen it that way, of course, is a very different question. But we know that that's a threat.
All right. We're going to carry on. Let's go back to some comments and questions. If you'd like to contribute to the show, if you'd like to buy us a coffee, you're more than welcome to do so. Please do. I think I can get about 5 coffees for Gerard's 1 coffee in Canada. But please do contribute. Looking at let's have a look. We've got Damien join. Oh, let me take that down. Hopefully you scanned it. Let me take that off as well. Then we can look at our comments properly. Hi from King Williamstown, Damien. Always lovely to have our friends from that part of the world with us. I spent my university days nearby there. Matt Bell says, great channel. Thanks very much. We appreciate you. I think a lot of from Bianca, I think a lot of perpetrators of numerous different crimes get away because they know victims of that crime get judged, like stalking victims, rape victims, domestic violence victims. Yeah, I think people definitely play on kind of known insecurities and known stigmas that exist around these kinds of cases.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Shall I carry on a bit? If you want to comment, Jared, just make a note. Stalking is also multiple WhatsApps and phone calls. Our local SAPs seem quite clued up on it in the South Cape area. They were very helpful to a friend who was being stalked on multiple levels. Well, great. That's good to hear. Let's take a question. Do you think that this fact makes certain types of crime more attractive in a way to perpetrators? I was going to start to ask you about this, just a little bit of the kind of psychology. What is the allure here for an individual who's clearly got some psychological stuff going on?
So look, there's different reasons why people stalk, and that's what you also have to understand. Stalkers aren't always people sending you angry, threatening, I'm going to kill you, I hate you, you're a bitch, etc. That's, of course, one kind of stalker, and that's very often in your breakup of a relationship. But you get stalkers who might have, and that's not necessarily mental illness. Then you might have stalkers who, for example, feel that they are in love with someone. It could be a famous person, your celebrity stalkers, or someone you've seen on TV, and for some reason you think they love you. And that's very often sort of a delusional thought. So your messages to the person are, you're amazing, I love you, we're supposed to be together, which of course is terrifying for the receiver when it's like, I don't know who this person is. Sometimes it's, like I said, an angry customer who fires off a bunch of emails, you guys are useless, you're shit, blah, 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 I'm going to do this, da, da, da. That's also stalking. We just don't necessarily think of it that way. So there's different reasons why people stalk, and that's kind of important to help understand, how long is this going to last for? What kind of response should we give? Would a protection order help? If someone's delusional, a protection order is not going to make them stop. You might want to rather get the person involuntarily admitted if that circumstances require. Or you take out the protection order knowing they're going to transgress it, and hopefully the court can order the person, trying to get the person caught up in the formal legal system that could maybe get them into some court-ordered treatment. So there's lots of different reasons why people do it, and that's going to impact on how we would respond to these types of things.
Okay, and yeah, it is called RICA. Sorry, Damien, I don't know why. I've always got a habit of putting an F there. Like, I think too many years of playing FIFA, so I just go to
FICA's
FICA.
the bank. Isn't FICA the banking stuff?
Sorry, okay,
RICA's
yeah, RICA is the cell phone stuff. Yeah, okay, thanks. Thank you for the
you
correction.
Can also
I'm always happy to own up to my ignorance. Yeah.
You can get mental illness issues plain, or like I said, delusional, when you've got that fixed false belief that someone's in love with me or whatever that fixed false belief is, which causes you to reach out and contact someone. You can get paraphilias, which are your abnormal sexual interests, such as if you are a voyeur, a peeping Tom, might cause you to go and look through the window or place a camera or follow some woman that you're sexually interested in. So there's, there are some mental illness, but a lot of this is, as I said, the context of an ex relationship is probably the most frequent type of stalking, where the guy doesn't want to let it go. He, whatever reasons, he's angry and upset and fires off these horrible messages, or please, can we get back together? And you've said, no, leave me alone. It then becomes stalking behavior. Okay,
so podcast hosts sneaking into their co-host bedroom in the night and watching them sleep would count.
Exactly. That would definitely, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm
in
sorry.
addition to housebreaking.
I'm sorry, Joe, but at least I got away with it. Okay, so back to the case. You've identified, 40 plus victims here. Are you obliged now to go and open a case that is 40 dockets wide? How are you kind of identifying kind of key cases to focus on and look at as part of the investigation?
So I reached out to the people who had the most messages. I thought I'd start with them because they had the most evidence. They would be the most aggrieved, as opposed to the person who got 2 messages. So I started with them, and you kind of get to a point where you're either struggling to get hold of the other people, or other people are saying, no, thank you, I'm not interested. I had 9. I felt that was a good enough number. And one of them had actually, what's interesting is that out of all of those people, one had managed to open up a criminal case at Bedford View Police Station. So we went there and took that docket, and like nothing had been done in 6 weeks. They hadn't even subpoenaed the cell phone company to trying to do what we did. Nothing. This is the only way you're going to solve this case was by doing what we did, and they hadn't. So we took that docket. One of the other people had gone to a police station, the HR manager, and they just took a statement and said, no, you must go sort this out with Vodacom, which is absolute nonsense. Vodacom's got nothing to do with this. But first they also said, let me have a look at the videos, and had a good laugh at the videos that she had received. So, just absolutely shocking behavior. And the others just felt either it isn't a crime, or the police are not going to do anything, or it's not that much of a bother because he moved on, but then he would come back and, a little while later, etc. So basically, when I felt that I had 9 people, quite a few of them still had the messages, which was great from an evidential point of view. Some people had deleted them, but that's okay. Some of them we were able to download the videos, etc., took their statements. And when I had 9, we felt we were ready to go to the court and apply for a search warrant and an arrest warrant.
Okay. Now, in the meantime, what information were you gathering on your suspect?
So basically what we'd known is what was available from the psychiatrist, because obviously when you go to a psychiatrist, you fill in lots of information. We knew his place of employment. I'm trying to think whether we only went to see the HR person after we'd arrested him, or whether we went to see her before we had arrested him, and I can't recall. Because, of course, you have to be careful, and you want to move quite quickly, because the last thing you want is for somebody now to say, the police are coming for you, they know who you are. And, of course, we didn't tell the victims who this person was, except the psychiatrist knew. At that point, we wanted to first do the arrest, because also now you can imagine this victim tells her boyfriend, it's like, I'm going to go F up this guy. So we have to be very careful about that. We don't want people taking the law into their own hands. That's not good for them, and it's not, of course, good for our potential suspect. Yeah. So we moved quite quickly once we felt we'd gotten what we want, got the arrest warrant and search warrant for the house, and then we moved very quickly to go and pick him up.
When you're applying for the arrest warrant and the search warrant, how specific do you have to be with the kind of information that you're providing? Because, I mean, is it just a blanket search warrant to go in and look through everything, or do you have to kind of specify what it is that you want to look at?
Yeah, so you got to specify what is it. Firstly, you have to write an affidavit why you need a search warrant and an arrest warrant. You'll have the docket with you that they can look through to see whether you've got good evidence to justify the arrest warrant and the search warrant. And then we specify what we're going to look for. You have to specify who's going to be present during the search. And if it's not going to be during regular hours, you have to specify why it's going to be after hours. So it's quite a lot of paperwork. Then you have to be very clear and motivated. So we specifically said we wanted to look for items like child porn, because with some of the victims, he'd said, the typical thing he would say is, hey, so-and-so, can we masturbate while I SMS, etc. Some of them he went a bit further. One he said, for example, I like to look through the neighbor's children's bedroom window and then masturbate at the little girl. So we thought, well, great, child porn. We're going to ask for child porn. Yeah. Obviously, computers and memory devices, because this was an electronic crime. Cell phones, of course, and then drugs, because we knew he had a drug problem. So we're going to put in there drugs, and we had a drug detection dog from the people from the drug unit there. We had people from the electronic, downloading people. We literally had like 20 people on the day that we went and did the arrest of this guy.
And talk us a little bit about just the reality of that. I mean, there's Brian going about his day. We'll talk about who the suspect is in more detail now. But how did that go down? And, was it like, you got me, or was there surprise there?
So essentially, we timed it that we'd go, because we knew that he wasn't working because he's been booked off sick. He lived at his mom's house. And so we knew the address. It was in Edenvale. And we set up everything, checked out the house the day before, so we knew where it was. Okay. The morning of course, Yanni de Lange, who was always early. I was stuck in traffic, traveling from Pretoria, and he seems like the guy was leaving somewhere, maybe going to the gym or something. So they pounced. So Yanni pounced, and a couple of them who were there early grabbed him as he was driving down the road and arrested him, and then took him back to the house because, of course, we have to execute the search warrant. Okay. So he was happily just about to go and do whatever he was doing on his, as I said, he was booked off, probably was going to go to the gym, I can't recall specifically. Okay. As I said, arrested him, took him back. So Yanni theoretically was the arresting officer on the case because he was the guy that arrested him at the time.
Okay. Good for Yanni. Let's take a question before we carry on with what happened next. This is actually my mate Garen, who's bringing Red Nose Day South Africa back. If anyone wants to be a part of bringing Red Nose Day back to the nation, then let us know on email and I'll put you in touch. But he's asked, how common is it with serious cases such as murder how common is it with serious cases such as murder to have initially started out with stalking? So, how often do these things escalate?
You probably find that the intimate partner murders, there was usually going to be some form of stalking behavior, but it kind of gets overlooked in light of the actual murder afterwards. But, this contact, angry messages, etc. But this thing about, some random person who suddenly starts to stalk and harass and then eventually ends up killing the woman, that's pretty much the stuff of movies, to be honest with you. It's going to typically be more of a concern, like I said, in your intimate partner relationships that have fallen apart. Then there's a process of stalking and threatening, harassing afterwards, and then a murder. That's more likely.
What was the case where the female victim, she'd taken out lots of orders against her partner, and he ended up actually killing her in front of people there in the entranceway to their apartment complex? What case was that? Because that was
we've had a few of those.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, fine. Let's all right. Let's go to Fifi. I hate it when the police want to know if there's was a relationship between the victim and perpetrator. What does that matter? Well, I'd imagine it does matter. At some level,
it would matter because it's then domestic violence. Even if it's an ex-relationship, it's domestic violence, and it should be more aggravating. And theoretically, the police are, with all this talk about crimes against women and children, domestic violence. So definitely at sentencing, it would be much more important. You'd be charging people for things possibly in the Domestic Violence Act. So yeah, it's if they're asking because you know what, you guys were just in a relationship,
Well,
it's not that serious. That's wrong. That's wrong.
This is why
But
I kind of
should-
see Fifi's point here. I think that perhaps what she's getting at here is that let's talk a little bit about some of the attitudes of officers when you go and report these kinds of things, and maybe what it is that some people confront and what's problematic about some of those things.
Yeah, so often, I mean, unfortunately, you do get cops who think that if you are or were in a domestic relationship, it's not that bad, it's not that serious. This is typical stuff that happens. So if you're asking for that reason, then it's absolutely inappropriate. But if you're asking because of you might want to have certain charges, or they might want to advise you, if you want to get a protection order, you must get one in terms of the Domestic Violence Act as opposed to the Protection from Harassment Act. But it should then maybe go to a FCS detective who deals with domestic violence as opposed to a normal detective maybe. But if it's because they're trying to say to you, hey man, it's a relationship, like you get, unfortunately, some people that go to the police station to report domestic violence, and they'll say, no, come back tomorrow if you want to really report, because you guys always withdraw these cases. That's absolutely inappropriate and wrong. You should never turn someone away from opening up a case of any nature.
Yeah, maybe if you met with that kind of behavior, is it advisable then to maybe go somewhere else and report it?
You can, you sometimes have it where a police station will say you have to report it in the jurisdiction where it occurred. Theoretically not true. I mean, you can report a case in Cape Town that happened in Pretoria. They will transfer the docket to Pretoria, and it might delay the investigation getting going. So it is better to try and open it in the station area where the crime occurred. But they theoretically can't turn you away. They should open up the docket and transfer it. Now, it could get lost in that process. It could take much longer. That is absolutely true.
Yeah, if it gets sent in the post, then it's definitely causing a delay. Keith asked, does the internet, doxing, etc., also fall into the stalking category?
Absolutely. I mean, these
question.
are just different methods. People talk about cyber stalking as if it's something different. No, it's just, 20 years ago, we didn't have cyber stalking because we didn't have WhatsApps and Facebook. I don't even know if existed 20 years ago. So all that's happened is that stalkers have just adapted with the times. I mean, 100 years ago, you had to send an angry letter to someone through the post. Now we can do it straight away through a ton more different methods, Twitter, WhatsApp, you name it, Instagram, we can engage in the same behavior. And of course, it's become far more easy to cover up your tracks. You can get anonymous email, I won't tell you which companies. You can, it's a lot easier to cover up your tracks nowadays without fancy technical knowledge, and bug people in a way that the police probably won't be able to trace who you are.
Okay, let's do one more question. I'm not sure if you would have watched, but the recent Kendra Lakari case, unknown number, the high school catfish on Netflix, is absolutely shocking. Why did it take the authorities so long to identify the mother as the stalker? I haven't seen that as yet either. Gerard, I don't know if you have. No, we will watch and get back to you, Paula. Okay,
but Paula, and again, like I said,
it's Gerard are watching Stalking series this weekend. Sorry,
it's typically things like I just said. It's either going to be because the police don't have the technology, and again, I don't want to give tips to people how to do this, but it's really not difficult if you just sort of do a little bit of Google searching to cover up your tracks in a way that even the most competent police won't be able to trace your number. So that can be one reason, but again, it can also be that the police just don't see it as something serious, and it doesn't get the attention, and then it just drags on and gets worse and.
Yeah, as Neil pointed out, sorry for the spoiler alert there, guys. If we've ruined your viewing plans on Netflix this weekend, we apologize. All right, here's an interesting one from Shelley. Hi, Shelley. Hope you're well. Some of the Devilsdorp victims were estate agents, weren't they?
Yeah, so the later cases, they call them the appointment murder. So the earlier cases were sort of frenemies, people that the little crowd didn't like anymore, that had fallen out of the crowd. Later on, the ones that were occurring around Krugersdorp was people that they'd made appointments with. I think it wasn't estate agents necessarily. I think it was also insurance or people selling like policies, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, they made appointments with people through their business, basically, and then killed them. So they were setting up the meeting to kill them. So I wouldn't regard that setting up back and forth as stalking, because the purpose of that wasn't to cause fear and and anxiety, etc. It was more to set up your crime. and then the murder that took place.
Okay, I've got it. We're going to go back to Brian, but first, thank you, Bianca, for your contribution. We appreciate you, and also thanks, Mom, as always. And hi, Auntie Ali. Hope you're well. Okay, so to our next question. Okay, here we go. Back to Brian then. When you finally had the chance to interview Brian, was his personality what you expected, or did he surprise you? So let's talk a little bit about Brian and your impressions and your interpretations of Brian.
Yeah, look, so obviously when he was taken back to the house and to be present while we searched the house. So we're not really interacting with him at that point. We want to interview him in a controlled environment. But he should be present when the house is being searched, although it was his mom's house. We did find drugs, etc. We then took him back to the police station to interview him. It's always difficult one to say. I think you often, in any case you're investigating, you build up an image of this person in your mind based on their crimes. Serial murder cases, good point, case in point, and often the person is just not what your mind was building up inadvertently in the background. With these cases, I would say he was perhaps more like what I maybe expected, a guy who was a little bit, I don't want to speak unkindly, but a little bit sort of pathetic in his interpersonal style. But that's very often why people are doing these crimes, because they don't have those social ability to interact with people, with women, as we all would. And, so he was less of a surprise, if I can put it that way. And he was quite, from the moment, like cooperative. He blabbed in the police station. We were taking his warning statement, and he just said, look, those things you found there, those are drugs. That's cat. This is that. That's steroid. So he did not, try and wiggle his way out of it, which, I respect.
Yeah.
What's interesting is while we were there, obviously his mother was absolutely devastated, as can and be understanding. And his brother arrived, the brother and his wife. And the brother was, of course, what is going on here? And how can you do this? Blah, blah, blah. And we kind of pulled him aside and we said, this is a situation. We have a warrant. We have a search warrant. And this is what your brother has been doing. And what was interesting is, as I'm explaining what he'd been doing with the messages, the wife sort of started to cry, which I thought, okay, maybe it's just a very emotional situation. The brother then sort of went off and I think spoke to the mom and came back to me about 10 minutes later, and he was totally changed his attitude. And he says, as a family, we're happy. We really want to cooperate with you guys, which again, we appreciated 100%. And he says, we are going to get him a lawyer, but only on the condition that if he pleads guilty, if he's done these things. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wondered afterwards, and I didn't want to ask because it, didn't really matter. If the brother's wife hadn't actually received some messages from him, because as I said, her reaction when we were explaining what's going on, going away, coming back 5 minutes, 10 minutes later, and the brother had a totally different attitude and was very supportive of us, etc. That's purely a hypothesis. I don't have any proof of that, and I hope not, because it would be horrible if that's what she did receive from her brother-in-law. Yeah. But anyway, the family was quite cooperative.
But also maybe, notice some odd behaviors, or, would these things may spill over into kind of, social interactions at some level, I would presume.
Yeah, look, so when we spoke to people and we eventually told them who it was, they were all like, the ones that knew him were like, oh my goodness, I'm so surprised. He was, kind of always a bit of a loner, kind of someone you've kind of felt sorry for, and you maybe would invite him out if there's a group of you going out together, but nothing like bizarre, weirdo, stay away from me, but just kind of like a quiet, maybe socially a little bit awkward kind of dude. What's also interesting, what was I going to say now? It was, and the woman who was a personal trainer at the gym said, oh my goodness, because I remember once saying to him, I've been getting these harassing messages, and he was incredibly supportive of me about the messages. And I thought, what a nice guy. He's understanding. And surprise, surprise. Of course, if you stalk your HR boss, that's probably the worst person in the company you could stalk. And we'll get to the consequences in a moment. But most people that knew him had said he was like a kind of just like I described him now, not a weirdo, just kind of like awkward, didn't really have a girlfriend. at best you could say, but it was sort of a loser, to use that term very sort of loosely. Nothing like people picked up, oh my goodness, yeah, he used to ask me if he could sniff my panties kind of stuff. Not the weirdos that we often get.
Okay. Gerard, not everyone gets weirdos like that often, okay?
Where you were.
Just pointing that out. What about media coverage at the time? Was there any?
So we also were concerned that there could have been other people that we hadn't been able to trace or that had been the victim of him. So we did, contact 702, and it was mentioned that a guy had been stalking. ETV ran the story, not obviously with his name. I got tons of phone calls from other women who had been stalked, but they weren't, I don't recall that any of them were this guy's victims. But it just really highlighted that there's a lot of women out there that have been stalked, and that the cases just aren't really getting much attention. Now, what's interesting is that we arrested him on a Thursday. Now, in the South African law, when you arrest someone, you have to bring them before the courts as soon as possible within 48 hours. Now, a lot of cops think that you've got 48 hours. Before you can do whatever you want for 48 hours, then bring him to court on hour number 47. That's not true. It's as soon as possible within 48 hours. So you'll have to explain to the court, why didn't you bring him within 5 hours, within 10 hours, by the end of the day? Okay. So you'd have to explain, well, we were running around all of a sudden because of the arrest. We found new information. We had to take exhibits. We had to take further statements. At other cases, you can't say, well, I just took a holiday and then I went off. Then technically you've detained him illegally for that period of time. We were quite busy, of course. We arrested him, I think it was a Thursday morning. I know the Monday or the Tuesday, I think were public holidays. So essentially, and if it's a public holiday, the 48 hours is extended. Or if it's a weekend, the 48 hours is extended. So he spent 5 days in Germiston police cells before he was brought to court. We weren't surprised. He got bail. I mean, I wasn't really too expecting him not to. I think it would have been quite harsh for him not to get bail under these circumstances. I think he paid 2,000 Rand. He had to report 3 times a week at Bedford View Police Station. And of course, he was not allowed to have any direct or indirect contact with any of the victims. But he admitted to everything, gave a comprehensive warning statement. And I have to almost say, I didn't like what he did, because what he did was very horrific for these women. But I kind of felt sorry for him. He could have gone to school with me. I've said that about a few of our suspects. He kind of guy literally could have been in my class. Yeah. So he had to pay for his crimes, but I didn't have any reason to be mean or angry at him. And the times when we would meet at the court appearances when the cases was postponed, we'd sit and chat to each other. It's not like I hated him and he hated me. I always say it's better to treat your suspects humanely. It's far better in your interests than having them hate you and just cause trouble in the investigation or in prosecution.
I'd imagine, though, unlike, say, a serial killer where you'd assume that there's some kind of real underlying psychological problem, these kinds of cases can be that, but you can also do it if you're just a chop.
Yeah. Look, and he said, look, I did this whenever I was high. But if we look at the times of the day when some of these messages were sent, he would have been high all the time, which is possible, of course. And I don't doubt that, if he's high, it's a disinhibitor. But the drugs isn't why he was doing this. Drugs just, it's the same reason when housebreakers drink before they go break into houses. It gives them that Dutch courage. It's not that drinking Heineken or Zamalek is going to make you a housebreaker. So we always have to be careful of how we explain it to courts. I mean, the consequences, even up until before the trial, he lost his job. Of course, you stalk your HR manager, you're going to lose your job very quickly. He was banned from all Virgin Active gyms, which was the gym that he had been stalking. One of his victims was from the gym. And eventually, it took about 6 months, and I was very for the court process. And this is where I was a bit peeved, because I tell you, when I presented that docket to the prosecutor, it had typed statements, it had everything attached. It was a docket that was fantastically prepared for and I think any prosecutor would have gone, wow, thanks for this, because normally I get terrible looking dockets. And I remember I dropped it off, and then a couple of days later, I thought, let me just give the prosecutor a call. And I said, hi, so-and-so, I'm the investigating officer of this case, Brigadier Labuschagne. And she flew off the handle at me. And I thought, does she think I'm someone else? Because I can't understand why she's having a go and shouting at me. And I said I'd let you know if I needed anything.
Boy.
And I thought, I don't get this, because normally I think it would be the opposite. The investigating officers aren't particularly necessarily enthusiastic and interested in, hey, I'm here to help, let me know.
Exactly.
So anyway, we eventually get a charge sheet back from her, which was pathetic. It was, for some people who received video messages, they would have a charge. Then for other people who received video messages, there was no charge. So I said, I'm not accepting this. And I went to the High Court, to the DPP's office, to speak to the advocates. And I said, can you guys review this charge sheet? Because it's completely inconsistent. And they said, yeah, all you have to do is make a request. And the docket was passed over to the DPP's office. They did the charge sheet more in line with what it should have been, sent it back to the regional court, and we had a proper charge sheet. I don't know, some people, I don't know.
Just more reasons why, the kind of cops like Gerard Labuschagne that we're losing out of SAPS is just so sad.
Yeah. So eventually, look, remember, we started this investigation in July. We did the search warrant and arrest 5th of August, I think it was. Eventually, 26th of January, he finally managed to plead guilty on all counts. So he did that. And what's interesting is that, remember I said that the brothers said they're going to get him a lawyer as long as he pleads guilty. So not long after his arrest, I had a phone call from someone who I knew quite well, who was a prosecutor in Pietermaritzburg. And I'm saying, hey, Adele, what's up? And she's like, what has my client done? And I was a bit confused because prosecutors don't have clients. I said, sorry, what are you talking about? She says, Brian. I'm like, hang on a minute. You're a prosecutor. What are you Oh, no. I've left the DP's office down in KZN, and I've moved up to Johannesburg. I'm working at a practice as a private lawyer in Kempton Park. I'm like, oh. So it just turned out that someone who I'd known and been a witness for many times in her prosecutions was defending Brian. I said, no, he just happened to stalk the wrong person. And that's sort of how my involvement got into it. So we had a very good working relationship because I knew Adele, very well. And I said, look, anything you need, let me know. And this is the situation. So that also helped things, go quite smoothly. But like I said, pled guilty. The charges were in the Sexual Offences Act, compelling a person over the age of 18 to witness self-masturbation. So basically flashing is the term they use for that. Criminal injuria, because he said insulting things, I want to do this, I want to do that, sexual stuff. And then, of course, possession of these substances. As I said, pled guilty, and eventually, I think at the one point, the magistrate was even considering incarceration, which I thought would have been a bit harsh for this, to put someone in jail, but he got a 3-year correctional supervision, which may not, house arrest, if you want to use that term, may not sound like a lot, but it really puts restrictions on your daily activities. You can literally, if you had a job, you can go to your job and back. That's it. Not allowed to drink. Anybody can come and check on you anytime. You have to attend certain programs, have to go for psychotherapy, etc. And I kind of sat there saying to him, Brian, 3 years, you can get a degree. You can really come out for the better of these 3 years as opposed to just sitting around doing nothing. Yeah. And I think he went to go stay on a family farm down in KZN or something. The family was very, very upset with him. And understandably so. This is really embarrassing. And I don't know if we should get to the outcome now of what happened, or should we
not quite. Yeah, I just want to take a few questions and comments. I actually have a question for you because, one of my pet peeves is that I firmly believe that if you're a grown adult man and you're able to hold down the kind of lifestyle that affords you a Mercedes Benz, then there's no need. You should be able to hold it until you get to the office. One of my pet peeves is when I'm doing my kind of commutes, is just noticing how many men will pull over on the side of the highway. I'm not talking about discreetly go and hide behind a tree here. I'm talking about like on the yellow line, peeing, facing into oncoming traffic. Can I start jotting down license plate numbers and reporting them? Is that because that's exposure, isn't it?
Theoretically it is. Yeah, the fact that you're urinating doesn't mean that it's okay to have your penis exposed to the world. So, technically speaking, yeah, that's a crime. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to be
dash cam.
I'm going to be in the police station every day from now on then, by the looks of it, because really it is. I figure that, we need to start getting things right in South Africa, and let's start with some of the basics, like, hold it till you get to the office. Don't have that last cup of coffee before you hop in the car. Okay, guys? Anyway.
In rush hour. But as to your point, you said an adult. he was 37 years old. He had been a store manager at a big chain, at a store of a big chain. I won't say which the chain, it doesn't matter. So he wasn't like a 21-year-old, idiot, or a 17-year-old idiot. He was an adult. And unfortunately, your behaviors come with consequences. So that's why I said I got along well with him, but he had to face the music for the things. And it's horrific for the woman. I mean, they started to be obviously questioning, who is this? Is it this person smiling at me as I'm walking to work? Is it someone I work with? It really has a massive impact that I don't think people really understand on people's trust. And you don't want to go out, and the one woman's husband was accusing her of, why is this guy doing to you? You must have led him on. I mean, we had even that. In some of the times, in some of these cases, when we spoke to the ladies, and I mean, I remember even one lady when I phoned her. I think her husband answered. No, a male answered the phone number, and it was again an estate agent. I said, "Hi, this is so and so." I just said, "I'm looking for Mary Smith," because I knew the name. And he said, "Well, that's my wife. Why do you want to speak to her?" I thought, shit, if I just say, no, it's okay, and put the phone down, I mean, she might get in trouble. So I said, well, I'm Gerard Labuschagne, and we have, somebody who's been sending harassing messages, and I'd just like to confirm whether that's her, and if she'd like to open up a case. This is very suspicious. My wife would have told me if she had received these messages, and he's having a go at me, and like, I want your phone number. And then I said, cool, this is my cell number, this is where I work, this is my office number, and he was having a rant and a rave. But an hour later, the wife phones me and says, look, I just want to apologize. I didn't tell my husband because precisely that he would react like this. So, you also got to take into account some of these ladies are facing their own problems back home. And I've had that in other stalking cases where the woman said, like, I couldn't tell my husband because he would accuse me of cheating on him, that I've led some guy on. Now it's gone badly. So I just couldn't tell him. So it's really horrific for a lot of people. That this sort of psychological terrorism that you referred to earlier, Paul. So stalking is very, very bad.
No, and I mean, it's again, I think why we have to always, unfortunately, women are so often and I guess let's talk a little bit about women often being the victims of these types of crimes. We know that it does happen to men as well, but would you agree that the majority, or the majority would be women of what you've come across? But, women don't just have to confront the actual act itself. They've got to confront all of the social stigmas or the politics, potential other relationship dynamics. It does make it that much more difficult. And like you say, it's not something that you can shake. You may not be receiving messages every second of the day, but once you're in that situation, it's just a constant harassment on your psyche, isn't it?
I mean, every time you hear a ping on your phone, you have to think, oh shit, is this going to be the dude?
No, exactly.
And what happens if you open it, like I said, and your husband's sitting next to you and there's a picture of someone masturbating? He's going to go, and this? I mean,
exactly.
It's just like really, horrific for various levels.
Let's just say hi to Helen, because it's always great to say hi to Helen. Lovely to have you with us as well. Helen, when you are with us, always lovely. Todd said, where do I subscribe? And that would be, you just hit the subscribe button. The bell will remind you or tell you send you a reminder when we post new episodes. And if you want to subscribe, just hit I think it's the join button. Yeah, the join button. All right. Let's see if we've got a couple of questions before we get to the outcome. We've got Shelley says, a recent case in the U.S., husband Daniel Krug created a stalker and stalked his wife and then killed her and blamed the stalker. Okay.
Well, clearly got caught.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Good. So let's see what kind of stalking case. Let's talk about sentencing. What kind of a sentence? We talked about his sentence. He got 3 years, but what's the scope here?
It's really difficult, unless the person has actually assaulted you in the process, you're not going to go to jail for the typical stalking stuff of like sending the messages, etc. It's not a jail level crime typically, unless there's been physical violence or sexual violence, or you've maybe broken into someone's house in the process. So that's the problem with this is, the criminal case isn't necessarily the solution to keeping you safe. I mean, if we knew that every stalker was going to spend the next 10 years in jail, fantastic. Then we know he's going to be put away. But it isn't often the solution to the problem, except hopefully him thinking, I better stop now because the consequences are too great. So the typical standard stalking, when they're sending messages, threats, honestly, if they even prosecute you, which is a good question whether they will, correctional supervision maybe, suspended sentence very possibly maybe. It's not like the person's going to go to jail unless they physically have harmed you as part of your pattern of stalking.
And somebody that is sentenced, charged, possibly goes through, possibly has a incarceration period. Are there any public registers, any sex offender type roles, those kinds of things?
So yeah, look, if you're convicted of any sexual offense under the Sexual Offences Act, you will be added to the Sexual Offences Register. But that is not a publicly accessible register. Okay. And it can only be checked by people, for example, schools that have to employ somebody, nursery schools, I don't know what the other organizations who can make an application to see if John Smith's name is on the register. So no, but there's not even if you have a protection order taken out against you, the protection order isn't a conviction against you. It's an instruction to stop doing something. So there is no public record that you've had 10 protection orders taken out against you, or that you're on a protection order list for various reasons why. But yeah, so often, might have a criminal record, which is forever, obviously. Only if it involves sexual stuff would you get added to the sexual offenders list, and possibly also they would say, you can't own a firearm.
I mean, why wouldn't that be publicly accessible? Because, I mean, if you've been charged and if you've been, proven guilty of a crime, then that is public information. And surely this is something that, that information is accessible anyway. So, and it would be a good thing for people in a neighborhood, for example. You got very proactive in Joburg WhatsApp groups, for example, and in cities, I imagine, around South Africa and wherever you are these days. So, it could be the assignment of somebody in your community to be kind of monitoring that on a fairly regular basis and just letting people know of kind of people coming into their environment. I mean, it seems like it shouldn't be an issue, or is it a technical constitutional kind of thing, or what?
Probably because I can almost tell you now, you'd have vigilantes and people would go after these people in the community.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't want a sex offender staying near me and they throw petrol on his house or just make his life miserable.
Yeah.
So that would probably, I think, is the main reason. What people would abuse that information, hound people. Now, emotionally, you might not think that's a problem, but that's what would happen, and that's probably why they don't want that as a publicly accessible record. Other countries it is, but not ours.
Yeah, I guess it's tough because, the law has to run its course. If somebody's been sentenced, served the term, then technically they've done their part. And so they should be allowed to be able to kind of adjust their behavior back in society. So I get you, but a debatable one, I would imagine. Were there any indications of it in his childhood or upbringing that brought red flags that he would do something like this? So you've said a number of times that the family was surprised, people that knew him were surprised, but in retrospect, anything come up?
Gabe, at that time when I interviewed him, my goal was really to get a confession, if I can, get him to admit what he's done. I didn't really interview him thereafter. I just chatted with him, as I said, the times he had to appear in court, and I was obviously there as investigating officer. I didn't really know how much his mom was going to talk to me because, of course, I've arrested. No matter what he's done, it's still her boy. Yeah. So I didn't go into that level of trying to find out background info. And my goal at that point was build my docket, present it to the prosecutor, make sure we can get a conviction. So it's a good question. Retrospectively, I also have those questions. Was there anything funny going on that they did or didn't notice? I'd be surprised if there was anything that it could have said, yep, this guy's going to become a stalker one day. A lot of people have social deficits, people with autism spectrum have difficulty relating to people, but people without autism spectrum have difficulty relating to people and speaking to women, etc. So I don't think there would be anything that could have conclusively said, we've got to watch out for this guy, or we have to intervene with this guy, otherwise he's going to be committing crimes later.
Okay. We've been going for quite a long time. We're at 70 minutes already, Gerard. So we're just going to start to wrap things up a little bit. Just Gabe, thanks for taking a break, by the way, from playing games. Have you dealt with any women stalker cases?
Oh, yes. As you quite rightly pointed out, the majority of people doing stalking are men towards women. But my experience is when you get a woman stalker, it's really bad. It's super bad. And I dealt with a case that one of the first people to actually use the Protection from Harassment Act, and I think this guy was in about 2012. I mean, he went through this lady, it was someone that he, in his own words, look, I had a sort of short relationship with this lady. It was a booty call type of relationship, friends with benefits, or whatever you want to call it. And it kind of ran its course. And this woman then kind of fixated on him. She created websites about this guy. She put up there, he's an informer to the police. He did this. He sleeps with, his friends' wives. And like on every social sphere of this guy's life, she was making accusations. Sure. He would start a new job. She would phone this employer and say, do you know that this guy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And they would say, look, man, we've got to let you go. And if he would go on a date the next day, and she was an IT expert, and the next day, this woman would get a phone call from this and harass this guy for years. So you do get them. Just my personal experiences, they are very hectic when women stalk. They do a good job, so to speak. Not a nice job, but it's from a stalking point of view. So yeah, you do get them.
I guess
guys want to report it because again they might feel embarrassed. I'm going to report I'm being stalked by my ex-girlfriend. That sounds like it's like any crimes when the man is the victim. They kind of maybe feel like it's a bit embarrassing to report.
Well, that's what Bianca said. I think it's not that more women get stalked necessarily. It's just that, like in a rape case, men feel more embarrassed to say that they are victims. So yeah, I mean, again, maybe I guess it's just looking at there are social differences between how it's perpetrated, how the response. Kind of based on kind of the gender norms and some of the, typical male versus female stuff, isn't it? All right. First of all, Shelley, thank you very much for the contribution. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. Stalkers, can stalkers escalate, Gerard?
Yeah. So we have a lot of stalking assessment guidelines, like the Stalking Assessment and Management version 2, the SAM version 2, which is actually produced by the company that I work for, is a mechanism for assessing the concern for the stalking behavior. There's things like the stalking risk profile, the SRP. So there are stalking instruments which we professionals would use to assess the level of concern and where it could go to. So absolutely it can escalate on its own. It can escalate based on how the victim responds or doesn't respond. So for sure. So that's why it's always an ongoing monitoring of the concern based on what is the person doing now. Did he go from sending WhatsApp messages to sending WhatsApps and emails? That's now a different angle. Or pitching up outside your house. That's another concern. So we always look at how's the behavior changing. Is it persistent? Is it fixated? Is it chronic, etc. There are ways that we look at it and monitor it to see. So absolutely it can escalate in various forms or fashions. And of course, I think this also maybe touches on the issue, which I just want to briefly touch on, is what can you do? But short of opening up a criminal case, because like I said, maybe some of the behavior doesn't reach the level of a criminal case. If someone's sending you flowers every day at your work, that's stalking if you don't want it to happen. So you might be able to then rather apply for a protection order. So like I said briefly in the beginning, this is very important for anybody who wants to do this. If there was any form of romantic, even if you went on one date with this person and you decided this isn't the person for me, I'm not interested, you met them on Tinder, you had the date, no thank you, and then they started to harass you and engage in stalking behavior, you would use the Domestic Violence Act protection order. If there was no history, even like one day, one date, no romantic relationship ever between the two of you, and it's your neighbor that's bothering you or a customer from work, it's not coming from some kind of a potentially intimate relationship scenario, you would use the Protection from Harassment Act. Very similar, but both of them, you can download the forms on the internet, write a nice, thorough affidavit, because what people typically don't do is, I'll speak to people and they say, I applied for, this is what happened, and I applied for a protection order and I didn't get it. And I'll be going, wow, I can't understand why you didn't get it, because all the things you've told me are exactly what this act is about. And I said, do you have a copy of your statement? Yes. And they send it to me, and it's like they haven't described half the things in their statement. So you really have to write a thorough, comprehensive statement. If you have any of these pictures on your phone, print them out, attach them to the statement. Any documentation to support what you've got is better. Then you go to the magistrate's court. The police are not involved in the application for a protection order at all. Unless you want them to certify your affidavit, but you can have an affidavit certified at a lawyer. You can have lots of people or commissioners of oaths who can certify your affidavit. So what I would advise people to do is download the forms, fill them in, prepare your lengthy, detailed affidavit, get it commissioned wherever you want to. You can even write it yourself and just get the cops to stamp it, like we often do for statements. Then you go to your nearest magistrate's court and you ask, where do I go for protection order application? They'll say you go to room 12. You hand in your forms to the clerk and they'll tell you to sit down. That clerk takes it to the magistrate in their chambers, and the magistrate, purely by reading your form and your statement, is going to decide whether or not to give you an interim protection order. He'll come back to you and say, ma'am, here it is, it was granted. It now needs to be served upon the person. Unless it's served upon the person, it's not. Until it is, it's not valid. So now what's the options? You can ask the police to go and serve it upon him and give you the signed receipt back, which you then take back to the clerk of the court and he puts it on the file. Until that return of service is filed in that file, it's not yet regarded as being valid. Sure. What I would rather recommend people do is sometimes you get the cops helping you, sometimes you don't. You can get the sheriff of the court. So for a lot of civil things, civil legal matters, the sheriff of the court serves the papers on whoever. Go to the sheriff of the court in that area and say, I need a protection order return of service. You pay them $300. They go off and they do it, and they hand it back to the court. And so we typically actually tell people, you can try the cops. You might get good help, you might not. But you can also get the sheriff of the court to do it for you. Now, typically, if they grant you the protection order, whether it's domestic violence or the Protection from Harassment Act, it's going to be a temporary one. It has to be served, like I said. And on that serving, it'll say, on a month from now, or whatever date, on the 10th of November, you must both be back here. And he gets the opportunity to explain and say his side of the story. And then if the court feels, sorry, your explanation is nonsense, they make it a permanent order, which is valid. One of them is valid for 5 years, and one of them is valid forever until it's set aside. So you get your interim one temporarily. You both have to appear back in court. Hopefully on that day, the court will say, we're making this a final order. Or they might say, sorry, but we're now letting it fall away. Maybe the guy says, but here, I've been out of the country. Here's my passport. I couldn't have been around her house throwing bricks at her through a window. And that's just the thing you have to make sure you follow. You only get a temporary one. You have to go back to make it a final one. But if you, for example, 3 months down the line, make up with your boyfriend, you can't suddenly, whenever you're angry with him, whip out the protection order and have him arrested. If you rekindle that relationship, you on your own are negating the protection order. Sorry, that's a nutshell version.
Well, look, I mean, that's a great nutshell, Gerard. And I recommend anyone that has knows of people that are going through these kinds of things and have need for this excellent and concise piece of advice from Gerard, just point them in the direction of this episode and get them to fast forward to around about now and have a watch, because I think that's great advice. Sorry. Just want to add to that. Like I said in the beginning, yes.
This doesn't mean that you can't also open up a criminal case for the criminal behaviors he's done.
Yes.
So it's not either the protection order or a criminal case. You are legally entitled to have both. So if the police want to refer you away, saying no, you threw a brick through your window, that's stalking. No, you can open up a criminal case for the crime and a protection order for him to stay away from you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Gerard. Bernadine says, I once had a guy phoning me up in the middle of the night because he said he was in love with me. When he became threatening, I went to someone in SAPS for help and never heard from him again. Okay, well, going to someone from SAPS, good idea. And Gabe says he always makes time to watch you and Gerard every Tuesday night. Thanks, Gabe.
Thanks, Gabe.
Yes, and we do see you, Gabe. Many years back, I worked at the magistrate's office in a small town. Many appeared before court for urinating in public. Those were the days. Marie, let's start the cause, okay? Let's start the cause. Well, like I say, we start at the basics. We got a lot of crime problems, but if you start at that foundational stuff and work your way up, it's the way to go. Gerard, let's talk about what happened to Brian.
So, yeah, I mean, this is quite a sad case. Like I said, I kind of got to know him to some degree and did feel sorry for him, but he had to pay for his crimes, without a doubt. And about a month after, I get a phone call from that same lady who was the prosecutor who then represented Brian, Adele, who's back in working as a prosecutor again, thankfully, because she was a brilliant prosecutor. And she said to me, look, I just want to let you know that Brian committed suicide. And I just think he just really felt absolutely embarrassed and about what had happened and disappointing everybody in his family. And of course he already had mental health challenges because he, was seen as a psychiatrist, had sort of depression issues and substances. And he unfortunately committed suicide a month later, which I thought was a very sad outcome because, every life is important. And unfortunately, that was the outcome of that case in the end.
Very sad. What is the recidivism like in these types of cases?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I think it's with your domestic violence ones, it's very difficult for these guys to let go. They might try and shift over to having friends, secondary stalkers, as we call them, start to take over for them to make it like, oh, it's not me. I don't know what you're talking about. Although the Protection from Harassment Act does refer to sort of the secondary victims and secondary stalking. And it doesn't matter. If you're instructing someone to do it on your behalf, you are still breaking your protection order instructions. So I think domestic violence is very difficult for people to let go because of the emotions involved. They either just don't care about the consequences or they will get other people to help them continue to do this. And I think what happens also is, let's say that it calms down, but now the lady, fast forward a year from now, he finds out she's seen someone and then it kind of flares up again. And he's now, even if he's already in a relationship, when he hears that she is, it flares up again. So your domestic violence ones are the ones that are going to be popping up with time. The other ones, and I'm again speaking from the cases I've worked on, they do tend to peter out. But you hear of cases that have gone on for like 20 years or longer, where typically there's a mental health component in those cases.
Gerard, in kind of summation, let's just sum up best advice if you are going through or if you know somebody who is going through this kind of thing. Headlines, what do you do?
Firstly, if you haven't already, be very clear. What sometimes, because most of us are kind of polite and we don't want to hurt people's feelings, we might not be as clear as we should be. Now, that's not to say it's your fault, but unfortunately, some people just don't get the social messages that the rest of us would get. If you've asked me if I've asked someone out on a date, and the first time I asked them out, they say, "Oh, I'm busy tomorrow night, maybe later," and then I phone them a second time, and then they're busy again. I'm going to go, okay, clear the messages, like they're politely trying to say no. But for some people, they don't get that message. They don't have that social insight to realize I'm being fobbed off. Stop. So definitely, when you're dealing with people, just try and be more clear about your no, that you're not interested. Thank you very much, but I'm not interested. Don't kind of, because some certain stalkers will interpret any tiny gap as, oh my goodness, well, we have a chance. There's that famous quote from that movie Dumb and Dumber that some of you who are our age would have seen. And when Jim Carrey in his character says to I can't remember what her name was, the main female person that he's fixated on, he says, "But hit it to me, tell me the truth, is there a chance?" And she says, "No." He's like 1 in 100, or she says, "No, maybe like 1 in 99.999 million." So he pauses and he goes, "So what you're saying to me is there is a chance." You kind of want to be as clear as possible.
Yeah.
Would that necessarily work? I mean, I've had a guy in this training that we do on stalking, and the case study is a real case study, and it was a lecturer who's been stalked by one of her students. I mean, she sent him outright emails, "Do never contact me again. I'm going to go to the police." The university said, "Don't ever contact this lecturer again." And he still saw it as some kind of a thing where he has to prove himself to her. She's testing him. So, you are going to get those that are absolutely fixated, and probably no matter what you do, he's not going to get the message. But I like to think for the majority of other people, if you're constant, but also what people must realize, say no and draw the line. Because if you say no, and then you carry on saying no again and again and again, that's contact. That's interaction. Or if you ignore the phone calls, but on the 10th time you're so angry, you pick up the phone and you say, "F off, I don't want to hear from you." What you've taught him is, I've got to phone this lady 10 times and then she'll pick up. So often the things we do, we don't realize are actually helping keep this thing alive maybe longer. And we always want to draw the clear line, withdraw, and not have that communication as far as possible.
Yeah.
But,
and like Bianca says, keep records of everything. I mean,
yes,
just
sadly,
your information gathering, all the messages you receive, any contacts, call logs, save and store all of that. And so that you're ready when you need to go to the authorities, you have all that information at hand.
Yeah. And even if you just archive block the person, archive the chat, I don't know, or download the chat, because now you can export the chat into a, thing. we don't want you to be, obviously some people say, well, should I just block the guy? That's a yes and a no. Definitely first, have copies of whatever it is, then maybe block him and see if he comes with a different angle to try and get hold of you. Some people might get the message, okay, that's it. So it kind of depends on situation to situation. I'm always nervous about giving a blanket response.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm happy we've gone a little bit longer tonight because there's just a lot of takeouts, I think, for people here. Just lots of information to take out of the episode and go back and re-listen to what Gerard's had to say over the last 15 minutes in particular, if you are experiencing or know somebody who's experiencing these kinds of issues. Gerard, final comments?
Sure. It is real. It is unpleasant. And victims always often just feel like they're going to stop talking about it because, they think people are sick and tired of it. But, you really don't want to isolate yourself. Do get that support. Don't doubt yourself. If you feel uncomfortable, it's a reason for concern to do something about it.
Folks, thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation around the case of Brian Harvey. And yeah, I mean, sad for the victims, sad for the perpetrator, ultimately. I mean, I think we just all need to be vigilant. We all need to be aware of some of the challenges in this area, and we need to be informed about what the best way is to approach these types of problems. If you would like to contribute to the show, buy us a coffee, please do so. You can also become a member for a small monthly contribution. Yes, we will. Then you get access to additional content, etc. We've been a little bit slow on that lately for reasons that I'm unable to really go into, but we'll talk about it one of these days. But yeah, we will be, we're focusing on the weekly live at the moment, and then we'll be posting more new stuff as well in the future. But do keep on supporting, share the episode with your friends. Gerard, have you got an interesting week ahead?
Admin. It's admin.
Okay, so you've been
writing reports.
You've been doing your traveling and teaching the last few weeks. Now it's back in the office for the paperwork, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, get through that. Okay. Enjoy the rest of your day there in Canada, folks. One last reminder to please hit the like and subscribe button, and we will see you again next week for more Profiler Africa. Thank you very much, Marius. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Gabe Plays Games, Bernadine, Lauren, everyone who tuned in tonight. My mom, as always. Thank you to Bax for handling the chat tonight. As always, we appreciate you, and thank you to Amy as well for all of her assistance as we continue this fun endeavor of ours talking about crime in South Africa and hopefully bringing some great information to you as well. That's it for this week's Profiler Africa. The Brian Harvey case really does show how psychological terror can be just as devastating as physical violence, and how systems not built to deal with it often leave victims completely exposed. Make sure you're subscribed, and remember,
in a country where 83 people are murdered every day, knowing the minds of killers isn't curiosity, it's survival. Subscribe to Profiler Africa now. It's free. Or become a member and help keep the channel alive. Remember, trust nobody.
Total, my first minute I was scared.
I think society deserves to be protected from me and from others like me.
They were sexual fantasies of control, power, complete dominance. They became reality.
I was scheduled, so I went to the garage. I got an ex.
Shh. I closed my eyes. Suspicious activity. I was crying so hard. And all of a sudden, he was there.
It was the only thing that gave me any satisfaction.
I am a human being and I killed human beings.
Dead won't bother you. It's the living you're gonna worry about.
Polis.